Our speaker this morning is our own Gerry Murphy. And many of you know his history, but especially since we've got some new folks, many do not. He was born and brought up in Ireland and immigrated to the States just over 20 years ago. After finishing seminary in California, he was ordained to the priesthood, and he spent 3 years in active ministry, and then took a leave of absence to pursue other options. He moved to Abington in 2009 to direct and coordinate the Jubilee Retreat House, and he did that for 3 years, and then moved to other areas of work. Right now, he's an online language coach with the Rosetta Stone. He officiates weddings, and he's a freelance writer with articles that have been published on several different news media websites. And he published a book 2 years ago in 2017 titled Deep Spirituality Meets Real Life. Oh, forgot the first part. Do it anyway. Deep spirituality meets real life. So he's got 2 children, 11 and 13, and we welcome Gerry to the pulpit again.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate your words of introduction, and I actually had hoped to begin in a lighter note by sharing with you the results from my Ancestry.com research. Kim, who's with us today, very graciously gifted me with the Ancestry.com kit at Christmas, and I sent everything in, but I think you have to wait, 5 or 6 weeks. I thought it would be here by now, so I could share it with you, because I do remember quipping up here one day, well, I'm Irish, I'm a Celt, I was born and raised in Ireland, as were my parents and their grandparents. Why would I even need to do Ancestry.com? I'm a pure Celt. However, as you all know, there's no pure race. We're a hybrid race. We've been infiltrated by Scandinavians, the Vikings, Spanish traders, Moroccan traders 10,000 years ago. So I'm really curious to know what has infiltrated my DNA pool. And when I have that information, I'll be happy to share it. Okay. So, a couple of weeks ago, Harry was up here and gave a very eloquent, stirring talk on the power of myth and the role and the value of myth in our world today, and the archetypal and the symbolic importance of myth, even in the digital age. And it struck a chord with me. And I've been thinking about that. 1 second. Okay. I was thinking about that since, because it seems to me the beauty of ancient or mythic wisdom is that its message is timeless, it's pure, and it's profound. And when ancient wisdom can be used as a corrective and applied to a modern-day situation or problem, then you know you've stumbled upon the truth. And for those of you who have been raised in a Christian denomination and may be familiar with the New Testament, you remember the line, the truth will set you free. So I'd like to begin with sharing a passage with you, and this is from an ancient text, the ancient Chinese Taoist, the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And scholars believe this was written somewhere around 600 BCE. And the translation of the title Tao Te Ching simply is instruction regarding the way of virtue. And I shared this passage on Facebook maybe a couple of months ago. because the whole impeachment inquiry and investigations and interviews were taking place at a very deep, intense level at that point. And I was bringing it into my prayer and my meditation, struggling with it, hoping and praying that justice and truth would prevail, as I had hoped it would in the Brett Kavanaugh Senate hearing and Dr. Ford as well. But sadly, truth is losing not its importance, it's losing its value. So this is the passage I'd just like to share with you. I'm not going to comment on it. I'll let it sit on your hearts. From the Tao Te Ching. When a country obtains great power, it becomes like a sea. All streams run downward into it. The more powerful it grows, the greater the need for humility. Humility means trusting the Tao, thus never needing to be defensive. A great nation is like a great man. When he makes a mistake, he realizes it. Having realized it, he admits it. Having admitted it, he corrects it. He considers those who point out his faults as his most benevolent teachers. He thinks of his enemy as the shadow that he himself casts. If a nation is centered in the Tao, if it nourishes its own people and doesn't meddle in the affairs of others, it will be a light to all the nations in the world. Okay. I have another preliminary extract I want to share with you. This is from a friend of mine back in Ireland. He's a priest, and he's in the Redemptorist congregation. I was in that missionary congregation for 7.5 years. He's a fairly radical thinker. He was an editor for a spirituality magazine for many years, but eventually got sanctioned by the Vatican for his radical progressive views. He has not been excommunicated or fired from his clerical position, but he's been severely reprimanded. Anyway, these days he has a WordPress column, and he wrote a little reflection just at the end of 2019, just on the cusp of the new year, where he's reflecting on his thoughts, the highs and the lows of the teen years as we eased out of the teen years into 2020. And sadly, most of his views were kind of somewhat troubling and negative. But as I read one of his points, it resonated with me and it related to what I want to share today. So I just want to share his words with you as well. As fascism, narrow nationalism, and right-wing populism gained momentum across the world, I lost hope that people brought together through the potentially unifying power of social media would focus on what unites rather than what divides. I lost the naive assumption that social media would bring people together and be a force for good, rather than become an easily manipulated tool that undermines democracy, spreads fake news, and feeds people's worst instincts. From being a lifelong lover of U.S. politics and the U.S. presidency, I lost respect for the office of president and for the party of Lincoln, Grant, Teddy Roosevelt, and Eisenhower, which allowed itself to become the willing poodle of an insane, dangerous demagogue. I happen to agree with him. Because we are living in very, very troubled, complex, and turbulent times. I'm not sure that this country, and I've only been here 20 years, I'm not sure that this country has ever been as divided or morally adrift or prone to violence as much as it is today. Maybe, I'm not sure when we were as divided. Maybe the Civil War. I'm not sure. It seems to me we've never been as partisan, divided, and prone to violence and division and polarization as we seem to be today in the United States. How do we pull that back? So I read Marianne Williamson's book, Healing the Soul of America. This was originally published in 20 years ago under the title The Healing of America. So she updated it, and it was published just last year under the title Healing the Soul of America. So I read this book a couple of times, and it spoke very deeply to me. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to ride on her wisdom for my talk today, because I can't put it any better than she can. But I agree with her, and I think her points are tremendously valuable. So we're going to do that in 3 ways. 3 brief areas I'm going to touch on is, first, a broad view of the spiritual malaise and moral decline we have fallen into. Secondly, I want to raise the question, why does it appear that we are so disempowered, disenchanted, and relatively silent, when really we should be roused to righteous anger, indignation, and revolt? That's a question. And thirdly, with her, I'm going to consider some of the healing spiritual practices and the activism that perhaps we as citizens of the United States could put into practice to help turn this around. Okay. That's the roadmap. So I do have a roadmap here, so I'll be coming into land. Don't worry. All right. I would not do that to you. So the first point, and I'll be quoting a lot from her book because that's her wisdom I'm basically writing on. So the first point, how are we so stuck in the situations that we're in terms of our economy, or moral values, and the malaise, the social dysfunctionality that we seem to be into? It would seem to be an increasing dominance of corporate wealth. The value placed on the increasing dominance of corporate wealth over short-term economic gain, over and above long-term health and education for our children, over the health and sustainability of the environment. It's the first point. Okay. Secondly, since the 1980s, income inequality has been on the rise. I'm going to quote here from Lucas Chancel. He's the co-director of the World Inequality Lab at the Paris School of Economics. So here's what he says. In the U.S., the richest 1% owned about 40% of the nation's wealth in 2016. And that's up from 20% in the 1980s. And Trump's 2017 tax policies have only, to use his word, turbocharged inequality, with the richest 400 families paying a lower average tax rate in 2018 than the poorest half of American households. And what we need to think about is, how does that play out in terms of inequality of opportunity for children and for women and immigrants in particular? So I'll dip into a short quote from Marianne Williamson on that. I can find it. Okay. She simply says, where there is little adequate education, as in the inner cities of America, there is no equality of actual opportunity. Where there is little adequate health care, as among America's poor and even some of our middle class, there is no equality of actual opportunity. Where there are very few opportunities for true professional advancement, as is also true among America's poor, there is no equality of actual opportunity. And I would add to that, particularly where there's no true professional advancement where women professionals are concerned, a huge disparity in the United States and in Europe. We still have those glass ceilings in the corporate world, in the professional world, where very professional and credentialed women are concerned. Patriarchy. Okay. And I would like to add, that, I'm adding another Another, my next point was, I'm basically resonating what she's going to say in a moment from her quote. We're not living in what she calls one of the first principles our country was founded upon. The Latin is e pluribus unum, or unity in diversity. So there can be no unity in diversity when we still have white supremacist ideology, and we obviously do. Where we still have racial inequality, where we still have continued judgment and discrimination and intolerance of the LGBTQ community, which we still have. But most especially where we still have very deeply entrenched tribal partisan politics. Even comparing today's impeachment trial to 20 years ago with Bill Clinton, I was listening to NPR and comparing them. Those parties worked together 20 years ago for the right solution politically and for the country to move forward. It's not happening right now. Serious power play, politics, posturing, and inequality happening. So very entrenched tribal politics, not helping our country to heal or move forward. Okay, and one last quote from this section from Marianne Williamson on that point, on unity and diversity. She says, unity in diversity is a principle demanding our personal maturity. We must develop the ability to tolerate the creative chaos of many voices and opinions, all expressing themselves at once. To not seek control over the thoughts or behaviors of others just because they are different from us, and to listen with respect and recognize the dignity of those with whom we disagree. And she adds, it is a first principle that each of us and each of the diverse cultures living together here has valuable things to say and to contribute. Allowing everyone to do so is central to our liberty, our genius, and our progress toward a greater good. Okay. Now I want to ease into the question. Why is it that we seem to be so disengaged, disempowered, disenchanted, not involved, not raising our voices of righteous indignation and revolting, at least not to the extent we used to? Why is that? Okay, I'm just going to begin with one of her quotes on that first. Here's what she says on this. Basically, her point is disengagement from the political process. Many of us haven't been involved in political action for the last 10 or 20 years or more. Most Americans are so stressed out just trying to survive. The economic tension that pervades most American households, quite contrary to all the official protestations that the economy today is doing good. Yes, good for a few, obviously, but not good for the many, makes cynicism about politics seem reasonable. People have had it with the government. It's not that we're apathetic about our country, but merely that we're disgusted with politics today. It's obviously a corrupt and sullied process. And how can fresh flowers grow in dirty water? That's what we need to find out. So I couldn't agree more with Marianne Williamson that politics has become a very dirty, corrupt, and mean-spirited game. It is a game. And when celebrity status and, the corporate money that you can garner on the campaign trail determines your path to the White House, we are seriously morally adrift. Secondly, and this is her point, I'm just writing on her point, the revolutionary spirit of the 1960s has been silenced. And let me read what she says about that. Those who carried aloft the most eloquent visions of a possible America during the 1960s were literally shot and killed in front of the eyes of the young who so adored them. From President Kennedy to his brother Bobby to Dr. King to the students at Kent State, the primary articulators of positive change, of dreams for our democracy in this stunning age, were permanently silenced. And the bullets that shot them psychically struck us all. Millions of us became in many ways like the son of Robert Kennedy, who, having watched his father murdered on television, got stoned and never recovered. Now, I wasn't going to add the next little paragraph, but last night I was looking and I thought I need to, because it's a tie-in to what I want to say next. The invisible order that shot our heroes did not keep shooting, but began providing goods and services as quickly as possible to distract a grieving generation from our psychic pain. They did not leave us out of their conception of what America should be. Quite to the contrary, they used us as their fodder, luring us into their planned environment of endless material consumption. We have been relatively quiet about anything meaningful ever since. Our leaders assassinated, our ranks dispersed, our generation received loud instructions. Go home now, scatter, go to your rooms and enjoy yourselves with all the toys we sell you. I know that does sound cynical, but sadly, there's an element of truth in that. We are living in a materialistically and digitally distracted world. We live, many of us, in a virtual world of reality. And to me, to my mind, the more we surrender our minds to mindless consumerism, to banal screen time, the more our levels of awareness and the more our critical thinking faculties erode. So then there certainly will be no revolution. Also, for many, sadly and regrettably, we numb the pain of our depression, our fear, our separation, and our sadness by over-medicating. We're the most medicated country on earth. And this, of course, is willingly facilitated by Big Pharma, our multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical industry that is expert at managing but not curing illness. Why is that? Okay, let me just quote briefly what she corroborates on that point. This is basically her spiritual perspective on it. Today, our states of bondage are not material so much as emotional and psychological and spiritual. And all states of material bondage still existing would disappear in a moment were we to free our hearts and minds. What we most need to do to be free now, what we most need to be free of now is our tendency to distract ourselves from the pain of the world. Our tendency to isolate rather than join with others. Our own selfishness and narcissism and unforgiveness and greed. Those tendencies are not our sins, but our wounds. They are our modern prisons. And the modern version of the American dream is to break free of these chains within ourselves. Okay. Moving into the third part of my presentation is to reflect a little bit on spiritual awakening. How do we go about that? What do we need to do? Who do we need to be? Again, I'll begin with her quote and then I'll reflect a little bit on it. So, here's what she has to say on that. As we meditate and pray, we begin to awaken. As we read good books, we begin to awaken. As we forgive, we begin to awaken. As we deepen our relationships, we begin to awaken. As we eschew mindless social media, we begin to awaken. We serve our community, we begin to awaken. As we journey towards psychological health, we begin to awaken. As we think for ourselves, we begin to awaken. As we communicate more courageously, we begin to awaken. As we take up the philosophical mantle of concern for the future of life on earth and apply it as best we can to our social, professional, and political endeavors, we begin to awaken both ourselves and others. And in that awakening lies hope for us all. Mass awakening from our entrenched delusions is the only hope for America's healing. Okay. Near the end of her book, she comments a lot on political activism, calling your representatives. You know, a lot of people feel that, well, someone else is doing that, or there's too many people doing that, your call will not go through. Your call will go through. Very, very, very few people call the Senate or call the representatives. And she's proven this from her own research and experience. So stir things up with your activism. Number one. Then she goes into what she calls 7 principles to guide our spiritual and political practice. I just want to quote those and add one of my own. So, here are her 7 principles to guide our spiritual and political practice. Number 1. The powers within us, mind and spirit, are greater than all powers outside. Number 2. Forgiveness and love are both our goal for the world and our means of achieving that goal. Number 3. We do not look away from the problems of the world, for that is negative denial. Rather, we look toward them and pray to be agents of positive change. Number 4. We embrace both the love and the sorrows of the world, for what is embraced with love is automatically delivered to realms of more positive unfoldment. Number 5. We will take constructive political action in accordance with the opportunities afforded us as citizens of a democratic society. But we do not act only in order to oppose what is, we act in order to make another more positive choice for the future. Number 6, we seek peace within ourselves at all times, for lack of peace within will be reflected outside ourselves. Number 7, we see citizenship as a moral responsibility to be used in love's service for the creation of a better, more just, more compassionate world. The only thing I would add to that, and I touched on it earlier, is that where politicians are concerned, they really need to transcend tribal politics. They need to move beyond destroying each other. And that's what they're doing through, mudslinging propaganda. That's all we're getting on the TV these days, or on the internet. That's sad, embarrassing, and deeply regrettable. Both parties need to return to their values, remembering those they're called to serve, and to stop this slavish devotion to huge political donors, in my view. Okay, coming into land here, so I am going to share with you a prayer. She has a series of prayers toward the end of her book. And for anyone here who's atheist or humanist and is offended maybe by the term God, I apologize in advance, because I will use the term God. You may choose to replace that with inner, intuitive, divine knowing, whatever you're comfortable with. Loving and Creator God, may our essential nature as a country and a people awaken on this day. May the glorious possibilities of our miraculous beginnings once more enchant our hearts and set us free of limitation. Break the chain of dominance which false power holds upon us still. Renew the spirit of freedom and love which are your truth within us. Amen. Thank you for your time and attention.
Good luck.